here's Brody Brazil.
Hey, welcome back to the channel, and by now you're very well aware I cover the Oakland A's, and I make a lot of videos about their future as it relates to a new ballpark, hopefully at Howard Terminal in Oakland, but also the potential of relocation to Las Vegas. I'm consumed by this, I'm compelled by this, I'm always trying to pass along the latest and most important information that's available. And part of that actually relies on looking at similar situations across the continent, whether it's Major League Baseball teams like the Royals attempting to move to downtown Kansas City. How about the Angels last year? There was talk of them moving away from Anaheim and going out to Long Beach. But obviously the biggest parallel to the Oakland A's right now has been the situation with the Rays out in Tampa, technically out in St. Petersburg, where the city of St. Pete recently came up with a brand new plan they have selected for the Tropicana Field site, including the Rays, which we'll get into here. But yeah, more renderings, beautiful renderings. Where does this sound familiar? Although these two situations are actually quite different in their process and in where they stand right now. Overall, though, I mean, look, a beautiful project. You can really get excited by renderings. I know I always do. Brand new stadium, brand new neighborhood, something that ultimately could thrive in St. Petersburg. Again, let's be very clear. This is for St. Petersburg, although there still is a situation at hand out in Tampa. So compared to Oakland, the Rays and St. Pete situation is very far behind. As I mentioned, the city just selected out of a potential 4 proposals, they just selected the one that they want to go with. It's a combination of the Rays and a corporation named Hines. Now, they are the ones behind the development of Petco Park back in the late 90s, early 2000s. They've done big projects. They do them all across the country. But St. Pete, home of Tropicana Field right now, the city said, all right, we have selected this particular setup, this scenario with the Rays and Hines as what we want to move forward with. There was also one of the other proposals that was meant to simply upgrade and fix up Tropicana Field. City of St. Pete said, thanks, but no thanks. We're not moving forward with that one. But compared, yeah, Tampa/St. Pete, going to have to work on that. St. Pete is way behind. They're just selecting who's going to develop this process. There's no EIR, there's no approvals, there's no next step. This is at the very beginning stages. But the project looks very similar. A new ballpark of around 30,000 seats, a whopping 5,700 housing units in this project with Hines and the Rays, 1.4 million square feet of office space, 300,000 square feet of retail space, 700 hotel rooms, 600 senior living properties, a totally separate 2,500 seat entertainment venue, and 14 acres of open space. Those numbers in a lot of ways are larger than Howard Terminal because the land, as you'll see here eventually, the land and the space of the Tropicana site is bigger, but it's all along the same lines of something similar that would be desired to be built. Rays co-president Brian Auld said this, quote, "We intend to work aggressively moving forward to meet all expectations the city has in terms of the timeline and hurdles along the way." Now, I have to tell you, when this press conference happened and when the city of St. Pete announced that they had chosen the group they wanted to move forward with, he was in attendance. He was very optimistic. It looked like that he was very much in unison with the decision that the city of St. Pete made. He then continued with a little bit more cautious optimism, quote, "We are at the very beginning here. There's a lot that still needs to go right to get a shovel in the ground." That was the end of his quote. And then he was asked a question by somebody in the media off camera. They said, "So, are you still looking in Tampa?" He paused and said this, quote, "We are continuing the dialogue." That's right. Even though this was announced by the city of St. Petersburg and they chose the Rays and Hines together to do this project, they still need to figure out a lot of things like, how they'll pay for all of it, not just infrastructure, how they'll pay for all of it. He basically admitted at the very same time, the Rays would still be looking at an opportunity in Tampa. Now, what is that opportunity? The Ybor Harbor site. That's one of the main areas that the Rays had been looking at. More on that site and its question marks in just a second, but it would be beautiful. This is just south of downtown Tampa, right on the water. Freeway access is right there. Looks like the land is a little bit more constrained. Certainly, space comes at more of a premium here, but this would be moving to Tampa. This would be moving away from St. Pete. This would actually be using the name Tampa Bay Rays, as in city of Tampa proper. But this has been talked about for a while, the Ybor Harbor site. It's kind of the sexier location, the better alternative than the Trop. But there's just one thing about it. Developers of the Ybor Harbor site, yeah, they came out with renderings recently of what they're going to do there. There's no ballpark. So there was some question about, is this site and its developers, have they moved on? Is this site no longer an option for a baseball stadium? Obviously, the Rays co-president says there is. I saw some others in the media who said, nope, it's still a possibility. We just did not decide to include it in this recent round of renderings for the Ybor Harbor site. But yeah, you can see how a ballpark mixed in that could go quite nicely if, in fact, that were an option. But let's not go that far. Just to let you know, there is the whole Tampa versus St. Pete thing still going on. So now going back to the comparison with the A's situation, the Rays are seemingly okay with rebuilding on their current site. It's historic to St. Petersburg. It's obviously spacious. That's very different from the A's, who have identified the Coliseum site and said, this will just not work for us in the future. We've been here for more than 50 years. We know it inside and out. And this is not exactly what we're looking for in a new venue that's going to cost us $1 billion. 86 acres is the Tropicana Field current site versus 55 acres is what the A's want to build on at Howard Terminal. So you can see here clearly the Tropicana site is much more spacious, not necessarily twice as big, but it's got a lot more land and a lot more opportunity to be built up and developed. And obviously, the Rays would have to build this new stadium right next to the old stadium before they demolished it, so that there is no time period where they have no stadium in operation. So that is a difference between the Rays and A's. The current site has a lot more opportunity than the current Coliseum site in Oakland. As for the Tropicana Field site and infrastructure upgrades it would need, $150.4 million of estimated infrastructure cost. This is at Tropicana Field. If the A's want to go to Howard Terminal, it's been estimated currently that it's $500 million. That number used to be about $150 million less. It has increased because of who knows what. Inflation, probably part of it. You would think that number is only going to go up. It's kind of a moving target, but that is quite a stark difference. $150 million of infrastructure versus 500. Now, the A's are trying to build on the shoreline of the inner harbor and the estuary, so there are more challenges and concerns and things that need to be mitigated and addressed at the Howard Terminal site. Of course, it's going to cost something more, but a couple times more is what we're looking at, 500 versus $150 million. There's also this as part of the arrangement that the city of St. Pete selected. It includes a $50 million community benefits package from the Rays to the city of St. Petersburg for things like housing, outreach, upgrading education, and employment opportunities. $50 million is what it's valued at. Well, the latest we understand is that the city of Oakland and the A's are at least going to reach a $450 million community benefits program and package. 50 versus $450 million. Now, to be clear, I'm spelling out apples and oranges. These are two different situations, and sometimes we're actually speaking two different languages here about one situation versus the other. But you can see that the ask and the demand of the A's and things are going to cost more and maybe what they're up against, and that's just the nature of developing where they are and where they're trying to go. This is more complicated. So as anybody sits here and gets frustrated by the process and the delay and the whataboutism of like, what about them? Why is it so easy? And comparison and peer pressure. Yeah, it's going to be harder. It's going to take longer. Inherently, I mean, just look at the numbers I've presented thus far. And there's even more complications to the situation, which we'll get into here. All right, going back to the Tropicana site and what has been at least selected by the city of St. Petersburg. 5,728 total units of housing, of on-site housing at that Tropicana Field current location right now. They've said that 4,869 of them are going to sell for, quote, market rate, whatever that means. They've also tabbed 859 of those units to be, quote, affordable or at a workplace rate. Workplace rate, meaning that you could afford to live in housing there by having a job on site there. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I think we understand that there is a certain selection of affordable housing as you would expect. Also 600 senior living opportunities as part of the 5,728 total units. So that's a lot of housing. That's a lot of residential right there. Certainly at Howard Terminal, the number has been pegged at 3,000 in the environmental impact report. And even 3,000 for the 55 acres does seem like a lot, but 5,700, that is a lot of housing development. But again, they have a significant amount more space at this Tropicana site. Okay, but then there's one of these big differences here. Talked about some of the similarities, ballpark, residential, commercial. A's and Rays have similar backgrounds in the way that they operate as a franchise. But then there's this, according to the Tampa Bay Times. According to a December draft outline of a term sheet for the development of a new ballpark, the team, county, and city would all share in the cost, including construction overruns, provided the Rays agreed to a 30-year lease. So we're not talking about just infrastructure anymore. Like, that's the situation in Oakland. Ballpark has always been entirely privately financed. $1 billion of privately financed baseball stadium. Now, the upgrades to the neighborhood for streets and overpasses and sewers and stoplights, that's all off-site infrastructure leading up to the project site. That's what's kind of in question right now for Howard Terminal. That's a big bottleneck right now in terms of this situation. I'm talking about the entire project. For the Rays and Hines and the city of St. Petersburg here, the team, the county, and the city would all share in the cost. So we're talking about a publicly publicly funded ballpark project here and site. Now, I'm not here to promote that, say that the city of Oakland needs to do that at all. I'm just pointing out here, like, this is a totally different situation than what's happening in Oakland, where the A's have said, we'll pay for the ballpark. Everything else just needs to be figured out. Just want to throw that out there at you. That's one big difference. There's also this difference. Tampa and St. Pete, two cities kind of under the Tampa Bay, Tampa Bay name, let's say. This is not a two-team Major League Baseball market. So right now you have the Rays talking about, well, we'll stay in St. Pete. Or they've talked about going to Montreal, for example, splitting a season. I'm glad that is no longer in the conversation of the cards. Such a bad idea. Such an impossible idea. But Tampa and St. Pete are both options for the Rays. There's no other team blocking the Rays from going to Tampa, like there is in the Bay Area with the A's. Obviously, you wouldn't go to San Francisco. There's a team there. But they tried to go to San Jose more than 15 years ago. That was denied by Major League Baseball. So geographically, they're kind of locked in to a certain region of Oakland and I guess surrounding cities and counties if they ever tried that again. We're pretty deep into Howard Terminal, let's be honest here. But I'm saying all along, for the Rays, the process has always had Tampa the city of Tampa being an option and the city of St. Petersburg being an option. It's just a one-team market. There's no competition. And also this, because of it, the Rays don't have to look over it, hypothetically, if Miami were right around the corner. And if the Marlins put up a brand new stadium, which they did, but if they put up one that everybody liked and it was right on the water and it had a cove you could hit home runs into and it was, all the amenities and it was well done, like the Rays don't have to directly compete for casual fans in Tampa or St. Petersburg to get them to go to their games instead of the other team's ballpark. So it makes this so much easier for the Rays. They're number one, asking the city and county to share in paying for their stadium. We'll see how that goes. There's also the fact that nobody's stopping them. They want to go to Tampa? Go to Tampa. You want to stay in St. Pete? Stay in St. Pete. But there's no league or other team saying, nope, hit the brakes. You can't move to Tampa. But the A's do have that. I'm just trying to point out to you how much more complicated this is in Oakland than Tampa and how far behind the Rays are in this process. They're just selecting a developer. And they still need to go through all the same approvals. So, what's next? Just so you know, the Rays' current lease, it expires at the Trop in 2027. But if they want this new project for the site, they need a development agreement. They need financing. They need to agree on that. Hey, city, hey, county, you guys paying for this? Or how much of it needs to be private? Or who's paying for all the infrastructure as well as the project itself? They need a binding vote, just like Oakland needs right now with the city council. Tampa is so much farther behind than the A's at this juncture. I'm talking about February 2023. Could that change quickly? I suppose. Could it go nowhere fast? Yeah, definitely that's a possibility. But what needs to be understood here is that the Rays' situation on paper should be a lot easier than how things stand in Oakland. So I just wanted to share that, let you know the situation in Tampa as I best understand it. And the disclaimer here, I probably should have said this off the top, is that I'm doing all my research to figure this stuff out, to bring you up to speed with the Rays situation as opposed to the A's situation. I'm trying to show you the similarities. Hopefully we've reached that, but also the huge differences at hand. And quite honestly, let me also throw this out at the very end. I don't really know who to talk to about the Rays stadium situation. I would love, honestly, to have a guest, somebody, who's the version of me or a Casey Pratt or somebody who covers the Rays stadium situation and knows it inside and out, knows the true story. I'd love to just talk to them. All of this stuff matters because, it's different variables and different obstacles, but it's an overall similar situation of a baseball team trying to land a new home. And so, yeah, these renderings are a couple weeks old, I think, maybe more than a month old now. People are excited in Tampa, but there's still a lot of question marks for the Rays. And their two options, their main two options are, 30 miles apart, 20 miles apart? Not even. So I would love to know more about their situation. So if you know somebody, recommend them for me in the comments section below. Also, say anything you want down there. I might respond, but I'll especially be thankful if you throw this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.